Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and I have a knitting tutorial for you today. So not too long ago from when this was posted, maybe a month or two, I made a crochet ponytail hat, and today we're doing the knit version. So this is constructed in a tube knit from the brim up, and then you add a drawstring channel and a drawstring to make a little winter hat. Mine's gonna look funny with my hair sticking out underneath, but it's just a simple basic beanie. But then if you have long hair that you wear in a ponytail, you can undo the drawstring and open up the top of the hat to allow your ponytail or bun to fit through. And if you really want to, you can open it all the way and use it as a neck gaiter or neck warmer. So without further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. In order to make your ponytail hat, you're going to need your yarn, some needles, and a darning needle and scissors when we get towards the end. Today I'm using the Barocco Sesame yarn, which calls for a 4.5 millimeter needle or a US size 7 to 8. I'm going to be using a 4 millimeter needle today because I want to have a fairly dense fabric when this piece is knitted up. For your yarn, I'd recommend choosing something that's rather soft and squishy and has a good amount of wool in it just to keep your ears warm. The one I'm using today is a blend that does have a little bit of cotton and nylon in it, but it is mostly wool and acrylic. I would recommend doing a gauge swatch for this piece if you're not using a standard cast on number of stitches for your hat. You can use an existing hat pattern that you know that you like in order to do this and just use that cast on and that weight yarn if that works for you. Or you can knit a gauge swatch in order to figure out how many stitches per inch you need. I have a tendency to just kind of wing it when it comes to hats, which is not always the best, but it's worked out so far. So that is what I will be doing today, but I'm going to use my knitting knowledge and tell you to do the right thing and then not actually do it. So for today, I'm going to be using a long tail cast on method. You're going to start by making a slip knot in a spot in your yarn where there's still quite a bit pulled out because that's going to get used up as we cast on. You're then going to put your slip knot onto your needle. I have my yarn attached to the yarn ball on top, hooked over my index finger. I have my yarn that is hanging out, hooked over my thumb. And then the slip knot is on the needle and I'm holding it with my dominant hand index finger. In order to make the long tail cast on, you are going to scoop underneath your thumb. Then you're going to scoop the yarn that's on your index finger and pull it through the loop on your thumb and up, and then you can drop what's on your thumb and pull it tight. In that action of pulling it tight, you should have your yarn reset. So that is our second stitch. Scoop under your thumb, scoop from the index finger through the thumb loop, drop from your thumb, and pull tight. That's 3 stitches. I'll show it slowly one more time. Scoop under your thumb, scoop along your index finger through the thumb loop, drop your thumb loop, and pull tight. That's 4 stitches on the needle. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Just looking at that amount, I'm probably going to cast on about 100 stitches, if not more, for my hat size. I'm going to do that off camera and come back. One more tip I realized I wanted to show you. So I have now reached my halfway point in casting on stitches. I have 50. So I could just keep casting on until I get 100, but I hate having to go back and split the stitches in order to have a front needle and a back needle for working in a magic loop. So I tend to just slide my needle so that the stitches are down on the cable, reposition that needle so that it's next to the stitches with the loop of cable over my hand, and then I just continue casting on from there so that my stitches are already split. So this is stitch number 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. Now I'm going to finish casting my stitches on off camera. All right, once you have cast on, you should have something that looks like this. And we're going to start knitting in the round with a knit one, purl one rib. Now it's really important before you start knitting to make sure that the ridge formed by the cast on is on the bottom of all of your needles. The needle at the top or furthest away from you should be the one that has the yarn hanging off of it, because in our first row of stitches we're essentially going to join those together by knitting. And if your tail from your long tail cast on is too long, you can trim it at this point, but don't make it too short because you're going to want it for weaving in your ends later. But if there's way too much of it, you can always just trim it. Okay, I'm going to slide the first half of my stitches that I'm going to work first towards the top of the needle, and I'm going to slide off of the needle on the back row of stitches so that I can work with that needle. If you have a really funky cable like I do, this might take a little bit of finagling, but if you have a nice metal cable, this should be easy. All right, we are going to start knitting. So pick up your working yarn, and I'm going to stop and double check that mine is laying the right way again because I don't want to mess this up. Insert your needle, and your first stitch, your first stitch is going to be a knit stitch. And you want to pull that pretty tight so that there's no big gap between your edges. After that knit stitch, move your yarn, do a purl stitch. We're going to knit one, purl one till the end of the row. One of the things that I try to tell friends who are picking up knitting is that your tools really do make a difference. So even though I've been knitting for a really long time, I'm going to struggle a little bit with these needles for the first few rows just because that plastic cable drives me crazy. But I needed the size needle for this project, so I'm going to use it anyway. But I really recommend purchasing nice needles the first time. Just buy a new size every time you need one for a project, and you'll slowly build your collection. Or if you see nice needles on sale, get them when they're on sale if you see a set. I personally really like using Chaogu needles, but there are lots of really great brands out there that you can use. Just kind of depends on your preference. I also have a really strong preference for metal needles over bamboo ones, and definitely not plastic ones. But you can use what works for you. Just make sure that you're investing in good tools, especially when it comes to needles with a cable for working in the round, because cheap cables are really no fun, especially when you're trying to start a project. These are feeling a little bit better the farther that I go with them, so it won't be too bad. I find that once you really get going, knit one, purl one can be a really nice rhythm to get into. But I definitely prefer knitting stockinette in the round, which is all knit stitches. You can do a lot of color varieties for these ponytail hats as well, but I think they look particularly good in variegated or self-striping yarn. Something a little fun to add a pop of color to your winter wardrobe. Especially since so many people just wear solid black winter coats, I think it's really fun to add a little bit of color. My winter coat is bright green, so that's not me, but I'll probably wear this with a black or a gray coat. And your last stitch should be a purl stitch. Then you're going to flip your work so that the stitches you just worked are now on the far side from you, and the stitches you still need to work are close to you. And you kind of shuffle your cable back through those stitches so that they are on your needle, or mostly on your needle if your needle is short like mine. And again, if you are using a cheap cable, this can take a little bit of finagling because the yarn likes to stick to the cable. Okay, there we go. Once you have it pulled where you need it to be, you then pull the needle out from the stitches you already worked, swing it around, and now you're ready to work the second half of your row. Starting with a purl stitch, make sure your yarn's not trapped where it shouldn't be. Start with that knit stitch and then purl, keeping the ribbed pattern going on the second half of the hat. Part of the finagling difficulties I'm having are purely because I'm sitting at an awkward angle in order to film this right under the camera. Normally I sit with my needles much closer to me, but you need to be able to see what I'm doing. So we're doing it this way. There's also a crochet version of a ponytail hat available on my channel if you are interested in the crochet version, or if you know somebody who wants to make something like this who only crochets, you can direct them to that version of the video. Sometimes it's really handy to know how to both knit and crochet, because while I generally prefer knitted items, crochet ones are definitely faster to work up, and I think it's easier to do intricate stitches in crochet. It's also easier to do funky shapes. So I definitely pick and choose which tactic I'm going to use based on some of those parameters. But for things like hats, I generally switch back and forth. Just depends on what look I want. Crochet will also definitely make a bulkier fabric if using the same yarn. So that's something to keep in mind too. But bulkier fabric is not necessarily bad for a big winter hat or for like an oversized chunky sweater. Just something to keep in mind. Alright, and your last stitch should be a purl again, and you should be back at the yarn tail you started with. Don't panic if you've got a little bit of a ladder on this first row. That's something that you can sew up with the tail end of yarn later if it really bothers you, but it generally gets better after the first couple of rows of knitting in the round. You're going to continue doing the knit one, purl one pattern for the ribbing for as long as you would like the ribbing to go. And I'm going to go ahead and complete that off camera and then come back to give you a little bit of a progress update. All right, once you have a few rows, you should have something that looks like this. I did switch to a larger cable or a longer cable, which did make it a little bit better, so that's good. I'm probably going to continue my brim until it's a couple inches long. This is about 1 inch right now. I probably want 3 minimum. And then we will switch to stockinette stitch. All right, at this point, you can go ahead and start switching to stockinette. I think it was like 2.5 inches, maybe close to 3. Yeah, a little over, or just about 2.5 inches. But again, that's personal preference, how long you do the ribbing for. But for now, we're just gonna switch to stockinette in the round for a good long while to finish off the hat. This should be pretty easy if you manage to do the ribbing first. I'll just go ahead and show a row on camera for you. This is also the point where if you're worried about your hat looking too small, the stockinette stitch rows should kind of flare out a little bit from the ribbed rows because the ribbing is meant to stretch around your ears. So if your hat looks a little bit small at this point, don't worry too much. I also love how the color changes are going in this yarn. It looks like it's just stripes, but it actually like fades each new color in and out a couple times before sticking with it for a while, which creates a really nice soft line between colors instead of like a harsh line where you can tell where the new color started. And I really like that. I think this is a yarn that I'm going to work with for some other projects too. I got it from one of my local yarn stores, but I believe you can order Barocco yarns straight from their website. I've never tried. Let me know in the comments if you have. A while ago, I ended up making a Sophie scarf with the summer sesame Barocco, which is more cotton and less wool. And I wear that one a ton because it's nice and lightweight. This one, even though the yarn still feels kind of light and airy, I can tell it's going to be a lot warmer than the summer version of the same yarn. Now we're just switching to the back half of our stitches for that first stockinette row. Switching to the longer cable needle definitely helped keep my stitches where they're supposed to be. Probably should have started with that, but sometimes you just don't know until you've cast on. I have been switching back and forth between this project and a project on nicer needles though, and the nicer needles definitely make a difference. So I will probably be purchasing a set of ChowGoo needles in this size so that I have them available for if I do a similar project in the future. Usually I order my ChowGoo needles from Amazon, but there's actually a couple of local yarn stores in Wisconsin that carry them, so I'm thinking I might have to do like a yarn store road trip day and just pick up some new ChowGoo needles in person from one of those yarn stores. Because while I like the convenience of getting them from Amazon, I would rather support one of my local small businesses instead. Alright, coming to the end of that first stockinette row. Okay, that's what it should look like at this point. So, for your stockinette section, you're going to continue until you have the height of your hat that you want. I would suggest making it a little bit longer than what you think you need because we're going to be gathering the hat at the top with no decreases. So we're just doing a straight stockinette tube from here on, and you're going to lose some of your height when we pull in those gathers with the drawstring at the top. So go ahead and continue knitting stockinette in the round. I'll check in a little bit to show you my progress. Here's what it looks like after, what is that, like maybe 2 inches of stockinette. I really like how in the stockinette stitches you can really see that fading in of the yarn that I was talking about, but so far I'm really excited about how this is looking. This yarn is also really stretchy, so I know this hat looks tiny, but it has quite a bit of give to it. Oh, I'm going to lose my stitches. Shouldn't have done that. But I'm going to keep knitting probably until my hat is 5 or so inches of stockinette, and then I'll check back in for the final few steps. Alright, I have reached my stopping point. I went for closer to 5.5 inches on my stockinette stitch rounds, just because I wanted that extra room. I also was trying it on as I went and just seeing how far down the crown fit as I continued to work. Again, the yarn I'm working with ended up having a lot of stretch to it, so this is going to be very custom depending on what your yarn is. But now we're going to start the row that will create the track for our I-cord drawstring that we will make later. So set up your row as normal, and we're going to be doing an alternating pattern of yarn overs and knit two together stitches. So set up your needle like you're going to make a new stitch, and instead of doing that, you just wrap the yarn around the needle. That's your yarn over. And then the next stitch, you pick up 2 stitches instead of just 1 and knit them together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. And this is basically going to create a row of little eyelet holes that we'll be able to feed our drawstring through. And this is going to serve as your second to last row, because our next row is going to be our cast off row. I also wanted to say that with hat designs like this, just as we're working on this last row, and I just almost dropped a stitch, so I'm going to fix that one before moving on. There we go. Pick that back up and actually knit 2 together instead of dropping half of the stitch. Come on now. Okay, there we go, back on track. Anyway, what I was going to say is hats like this that have no increases or decreases are a really good place to play around with new colors and stitch techniques. So if you have a stitch technique you've been wanting to work on, so something like stranded color work or a textured stitch or cables, a hat like this is a really great way to practice some of those skills because it's still a small item, so you don't have a lot to work up. It's just a little hat. But since there's no increases or decreases, you don't have to factor that in when you're learning that new stitch or that new technique. So I would recommend a hat like this if you're looking to try something like stranded color work or mosaic crochet, or even, or not mosaic crochet, mosaic knitting. You could do this in mosaic crochet too though. Or even something like a simple brioche stitch if you're ready for something like that, or cables. The possibilities are really endless. You just have to make sure that your cast on stitch number will work with whatever stitch pattern you're trying to do on your finished piece. But I think that a really, really colorful version of this hat would be fun. I think a lot of textures would also be fun. The first version of this style of hat that I made on my Centro knitting machine a really long time ago. And I ended up doing a folded over brim, and I did like faux cables, which on the knitting machine is basically like dropped stitches that you turn into like a little braid looking stitch. And it turned out really cute, and I wore it for many, many years, and that was kind of the inspiration for both this video and the crochet version of this hat, because I wanted more of them in my wardrobe. The one that I originally made was just a plain gray, but I did sell the knitting machine version ones in my craft fair items for a few years. Just because they were easy to make and unique, and they made great gifts. And these hats are fun because you can open the top with the drawstring to allow for a ponytail or a bun. And when my hair was really long, I really liked a big, voluminous, messy bun, so it was perfect for winter recess duties with all of my hair. But also, if you already have a hat that you like, or you're gifting this to somebody who's not sure, where you're not sure if they need a hat or not, this can also be pulled down as like a neck gaiter if you open the drawstring all the way. So it's definitely a good like multi-purpose piece. I will say if you're planning on making a hat like this with color work, just keep in mind that it's probably not going to stretch as well. So your stitch really matters in determining how stretchy a finished item is going to be, just like the yarn really determines how stretchy an item is going to be. So this is where, again, a gauge swatch would probably help you out. And almost done here. You should end on a knit two together because we started the row with a yarn over. There we go. Okay, now for our final row of this, we're going to be doing just a basic cast off. Your cast off style doesn't matter a ton for this because it doesn't really need to be stretchy. It doesn't really need to be super intricate because it's just going to be the top of the drawstring track. So I'm going to do just a basic cast off, which is that you knit two for the beginning and then slide the first stitch over the second stitch. From here on it's a knit one, pull the first stitch over the second stitch, and we're just going to keep going like that all the way around. I think this might be my new go-to yarn for fun little gift knits because it was a dream to work with. I love the self-striping. I love the little speckles that come out in those stripes. I love how soft the stripe transitions are. I just really had a lot of fun working with this yarn. Since I'm making this hat for myself, I will probably be making a little matching scarf or something to go with it because I did get 2 skeins of this yarn. And I probably have a good like quarter to third of this skein left at this point. So making like a little necktie scarf would be pretty easy with the amount of yarn left. You're not going to get like a whole big, huge, like full length scarf out of that amount of yarn, but definitely something small or something like a neck warmer would be possible. But I find in the winter I really like having a matching hat and scarf regardless of what format either of those two things are in. I just like having something around my neck that matches the hat. I think that that's a really cute look in the winter, especially if you can coordinate it with your coat or something like that. Currently my winter coat is green, but my like raincoat is black, so this will probably end up being something that I wear more in the spring, but I do think that this color combination is really cute. I did purchase this yarn in one other colorway as well that's like bright, vibrant jewel tones, like reds, blues, greens, maybe there's some purple in there too. But I was told that that color has been discontinued, so that one won't be available unfortunately. But there are lots of lovely colorways in this yarn. So again, this is not like a super stretchy cast off or anything, but you can see those little eyelet stitches forming from the yarn over knit two together row that we did. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the cast off row off camera and then meet you back to start the I cord. Alright, at this point you should have something that looks like this. Don't worry if the top edge curls a lot, that's going to be fixed by inserting the drawstring, but you should have that nice neat little row of eyelets. I'm going to put this off to the side and get out my needles to start my I-cord. I am going to do my I-cord on double pointed needles, and I'll show you why in a minute. I also went with a very slightly smaller needle size for my I-cord. You could go down a couple sizes to make it more compact if you would like. You could use the same size needles if you would like. You probably don't want to go up in needle size for this, so I'm using a 3.75 millimeter set for this. Then with your yarn, you're going to start with a slip knot and use the long tail cast on method to make 3 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3. Okay, and to make this I-cord, you're going to slide your stitches to the other side of the needle, and then you're going to knit all 3 of them, making sure you're using the actual working yarn and not the yarn tail. Okay, once you get to the end of the row, you slide it down and knit those same 3 stitches again. And this is what's going to give you that tube construction, because we're not turning the work back and forth. We're always working from the same side. So that sliding motion is going to keep all of your stitches in the same place. If you prefer, and it's more comfortable for your hands, or you're not using DPNs, you can get to the end of an I-cord row, and instead of sliding, you can just pick up your stitches back onto your non-dominant needle and knit them again. I'll show that one more time. You get to the end of the row and then just pick your stitches back up with your non-dominant needle and knit them again. You're going to knit this I-cord until it's long enough that even when laying it up against your hat, it's about double the length of the hat when folded in half. That'll make more sense once it's actually finished. I'll show you what those measurements look like in a few minutes. Alright, I have finished up my I-cord, but I did want to talk about what I meant about sizing. So if you fold your I-cord in half, when it's finished, you want it to be the width of your hat plus enough that you can still tie a bow even when it's fully opened. So that's the length we're going for. To cast off, you can just do a normal cast off like we did on the hat. It's just only 3 stitches, so it's pretty small. Like that. I'm going to trim it and leave a little bit of a tail, because we're actually going to thread the tail through a darning needle to get it through the tracks on the hat. So I'm going to pick up my darning needle and thread it. Oh, that wasn't a very good one, was it? Try that again. There we go. And I'm going to figure out which edge was my starting point. I actually can't tell anymore. Oh, it's this one. And you want to start threading your drawstring by wherever the seam was, because that'll just be the back of the hat. If you can tell, if you can't tell, don't worry about it. I'm just passing that darning needle through all of the little eyelet holes and then gently pulling the I-cord through like that. You could also do a chain stitch crochet cord for this. You could use a ribbon, you could use a thicker piece of yarn. It doesn't really matter what yarn you use. Maybe that was my edge. It doesn't really matter. Keep sewing it through every other. Not every other. You're going through every one, but depending on if it's forwards or backwards is what you're alternating. Okay, last one. I got stuck on a thread somewhere. Okay, I don't know what this little loop of white thread is coming from. I'm trying to get out. Okay, we might just have to snip that little thread. It's just a extra one anyway. There we go. Okay, pull it through. Just like that. So then you have your drawstring at the top, and you cinch it all the way closed to make it a hat. Weave in your ends and then you're all done. And that's it for this cute little hat. I obviously won't be wearing any high ponytails for a while because my hair's still short, but this is a style of hat that I really get a lot of wear out of when my hair is long because it's so easy to just throw on. You don't have to think about if your hair is up or down before wearing it. You can just go for it. So I will probably be recreating this shortly in other colors. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so that you can see all of my crafty content right here on YouTube. And if you'd like to follow me on other social media sites, that information is in the description box. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone!